What you're about to hear was never meant for the public. Behind closed doors, the man who gave Jeffrey Epstein a sweetheart deal tried to explain himself, and Jasmine Crockett wasn't buying it for a second. This is what Alex Acosta really said, and why his excuses fall completely apart.
Tell me, were you able to press Acosta on why he gave Epstein what a lot of people think was a sweetheart deal?
Yeah, so I was trying, but obviously there were a lot of members in the room, as well as a number of attorneys for both sides. And so I probably could have sat with him alone myself and dug for days. But I specifically was also listening to him. So at one point in time, he was talking about they were basically gauging the strength of their case, which is not abnormal. That is what prosecutors are always going to do. And basically he said, as a team, they came to the conclusion that the case was just too weak and it would be better if they had a guarantee of getting him into prison, as well as being able to make sure that he was going to be a registered sex offender. They did say they did not know about the work release, or he said he didn't know about the work release, and that wasn't part of the agreement. He says that, he also, well, let me back up. I basically wanted to know, why is it that the case was weak in your opinion? He said that he felt like there were going to be impeachment issues with the witnesses.
That the witnesses weren't credible.
And so then I was saying, tell me what the impeachment issues were going to be. Because it's one thing to throw it out there. It's another thing when I'm breaking it down to you, because I understand what is impeachable and what's not. And so he's like, well, some of them didn't want to testify. I said, well, that's not impeachment evidence at all. And has there ever been a situation where you've brought a witness forward who did not want to testify? What other evidence was there? And if you felt like the case was weak, and most of us have rules where if you've got a statement from a witness and because of fear, maybe because of threats, because he said some of them were fearful, some of them allegedly had been threatened, all kinds of different reasons. Man, there's ways to work around this. I say, let me tell you something. I have tried these cases on the other side, and I can tell you that we have had people come forward with hardly any evidence, because we have what we call a one witness rule in this country, which says that if you believe this one witness beyond a reasonable doubt, then that is enough.
Right.
And it really comes because of sex cases, because a lot of times who else can testify about what happened in that room? So I was really getting at him, and he said, well, 2006 was a different time. It was a lot different as it relates to the movement and what was going on. I said, let me tell you something. I've been practicing law since 2006, so I know what was happening in 2006. Right. So I was really ready to tear in and really get down to some other things, because I've dealt with child sex cases. And based on the little information that I know about what he had back then, in my opinion, he had more than enough evidence, but he was arguing that he didn't. And I said, well, let me ask you this. Towards the end of the time that I was going to be there, I asked him, I said, normally prosecutors consult with the victims. And there are some cases that I've had to go to trial on, not because the prosecutor necessarily wanted to, but after they consulted with the victims were saying, no, I want my day in court, and whatever happens, happens.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen. And that's why you had a problem. And so he gave all these excuses about.
And also they didn't alert the victims.
Correct, because they weren't.
Plea deal.
No, he was telling us about all these conversations he was having, but he wasn't having the conversations with the people that were a part of the case.
Yeah, it's such a cop-out, because obviously, if you are going to prosecute a drug dealer, most of your witnesses are going to be drug users. If you're going to prosecute a pimp, most of the witnesses are going to be prostitutes. If you're going to prosecute a pedophile, most of the witnesses are going to be children.
So I don't know how he became a whole U.S. attorney.
Well, that's my question.
And did not know that. So
I'm not an attorney, and I know that.
Well, listen, I've been in the court and I've dealt with enough cases. In fact, I mentioned to him that I once had to defend a serial rapist. And frankly, he specifically went after very vulnerable women. He went after drug addicts.
They always do. They always go after the weakest.
And I was like, and he got a lot of time. That's all I can tell you. So I'm like, obviously I did my part as a defense attorney, but I mean, it wasn't making sense. And even when I pressed him on impeachment, he never really got to impeachment issues.
Impeaching the witnesses.
Impeaching the witnesses, the victims. He never really got there.
What did he say when people asked him about any pressure that might have come to bear from wealthy men? He's
saying that he never really talked to anyone else really outside of this. And then he's saying that he never really got into the minutia, because my questions were more so like, I wanted to skip ahead and be like, why was it not a sweetheart deal? Because he was explaining that he doesn't feel like it was a sweetheart deal. He felt like, even today, looking back, that this deal was a good deal. So I wanted to find out.
It's so preposterous. What about the non-prosecution?
I'm just telling you what the man said.
I know. I'm not faulting you. But it's.
So I said, as you sat at this table, take us to the table, and you're having these conversations. I said, are you not asking questions about how you can make the case better? Are you not asking, did you go and interview any of Epstein's employees?
Yeah.
Like, and there was this whole conversation about the laptop. There was a lot of conversation about the fact that there had been a charging memo that recommended 53 different counts.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I know that happened, but I called in these child experts. And I also brought it to his attention that we have experts that typically come in and testify in these cases to explain away why a child may be inconsistent, because a lot of times the trauma that they have experienced at such a young age, their little minds may block out certain things.
Sure.
And so I was like, I've had that happen a number of times because I've also dealt with child sex cases. So, I mean, talking to him, I think if you've never done this work, maybe.
But he was a U.S. attorney.
Yeah.
Were there tough questions asked by both sides?
We missed the first half, which was the Republican half, because we were on the floor voting. By the time we got to the second hour, it was the Democratic hour, and so that's where we were participating. And then I had to leave, and then it swaps back and forth.
It's a busy job. It's a busy job. Texas Democrat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, always great to have you here. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was fascinating stuff.
This is one of those moments where the official story collapses the minute you apply real-world experience and basic common sense. Jasmine Crockett, a former criminal defense attorney who has actually handled child sex cases, walks us straight through why Alex Acosta's explanation doesn't hold water. Acosta's claim that the case against Jeffrey Epstein was too weak collapses the moment Crockett presses him on what that weakness supposedly was. Witness credibility? That victims were afraid? That some didn't want to testify? Crockett dismantles each excuse with courtroom reality. Fear is common. Trauma explains inconsistencies. And the law has long allowed convictions based on a single credible witness, especially in sexual abuse cases. What makes this even more damning is what didn't happen. Victims weren't properly consulted, alternatives weren't pursued, experts who routinely testify in child sex cases were ignored, and despite a charging memo outlining dozens of potential counts, Acosta still insists years later that the deal was a good deal. This isn't hindsight. This is accountability. Crockett exposes how power, privilege, and prosecutorial cowardice combine to protect a predator while silencing victims. And once you hear it laid out like this, it becomes impossible to believe Epstein's deal was anything other than what it looked like from the start.